Where will Kyle Lowry end up this summer? That is a big question for Toronto Raptors fans, especially for some of the contenders around the league, specifically the 76ers, and some of the other teams that were interested around the deadline, potentially the Miami Heat, the Lakers, and then some of the other teams that are interested in a point guard over the last year as well, being the Dallas Mavericks and the New York Knicks. Of course, there could be a free agency signing, and there also is a very high probability of a sign and trade, as well as the probability that he just re-signs in Toronto. All of these probabilities where he could end up and how likely each move is what we're going to be talking about in today's video, as the Toronto Raptor legend, the best Toronto Raptor of all time, has the biggest decision arguably of his career and the most uncertainty regarding his career and where he will be playing next season since he has joined Toronto. That being said, if you guys like NBA content like this, consider subscribing. I post 5 or more NBA content videos a week, reacting to games, trades, news, free agents, all of that good stuff as we get through the NBA playoffs and into the draft and free agency. So that being said, this is the good place to be. And so, Kyle Lowry has continued to be a very good player for the Toronto Raptors. Of course, he is now much older. He is not in his prime anymore by any stretch. He has taken a bit of a step back over the last couple of years, but he still is a very impactful player. He still contributes to winning a lot, and he can be very helpful to a contending team. He's not your first option. He probably isn't even your second option anymore on a contending team. But at 35 years of age, he can definitely be a team that can help a contender. You could definitely make the argument that Miami with Kyle Lowry have a much better chance against the Bucks this year. You can certainly argue that the Lakers with Kyle Lowry right now, instead of Dennis Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell, and THT, are probably much more comfortable in this series against Phoenix as opposed to down 3-2 heading into Game 6, especially with Dennis Schroeder putting up a goose egg in Game 5. Taylor Horton-Tucker hasn't played all that much, especially previous to the AD injury, and Montrezl Harrell hasn't played that much in the playoffs either. So that is definitely an argument you can make. The 76ers, although they've had a comfortable ride so far, you also could make the argument would be much, much better with the Kyle Lowry point guard who can get you some buckets and someone who can shot create for you on the perimeter, which is something that the 76ers struggle with outside of Tobias Harris, and Tobias Harris is not a lead at that by any stretch. And that being said, I still think there's a chance Kyle Lowry does stay in Toronto. I think there's definitely been a sentiment that his last game in Toronto has been, or not in Toronto, so it's not in Toronto, but his last game for Toronto has been played. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I don't think it's absurd to think that Kyle Lowry does re-up. I don't think Kyle Lowry is going to make a decision super early into free agency. I think he's going to wait a week or two, see what happens around the league. He's going to really think his decision. Family is important to him as well, so that's definitely going to have a big implication. That's why the 76ers have been linked so much, given that that is his home city. But I think there's definitely still a chance that Toronto is his landing spot. He loves Toronto. He loves the city. His family likes the city. Of course, Toronto love him. It is a great relationship. And if the Toronto Raptors either can get some good lottery luck and can move into the top 2 or 3, maybe they get Kate Cunningham, even more so probably for the fit of this team if they add Evan Mobley, or if they can add a really good center in free agency, whether that's for Sean Holmes, whether they keep Team Birch, and Birch was much better down the stretch, whether they bring in Nerlens Noel. There's definitely some options there. And I think this team just genuinely, if they can get back in Toronto, at home, in front of their fans, and stay healthy and don't have to deal with all the health and safety protocols stuff that they dealt with this year, this team's still a competent roster. And at this point in time, Lowry wants what's good for his family and to win titles. And there's no doubt that he can most likely do that in Toronto. Now, win titles? Maybe not. He'll be happy with his family. He'll be competitive. I don't think the Raptors are going to be a contender unless they make a significant move, which they probably won't. They'll be looking at a core of Lowry, Van Fleet, OG, Siakam, Boucher, whoever they get at center, potentially Team Birch just for being the starting center for next year, or someone else. And then you're still looking at the likes of their young first-round point guard, whose name now escapes me, which is embarrassing because I'm a Toronto Raptors fan. Malachi Flynn, he'll be back on the team as well next year, as well as whoever else comes in for that bench spots. And then Gary Trent Jr. hopefully will be back as well if they can re-sign him as an RFA, and that'll be a great piece off the bench from him as well. There's a lot of depth on this team, specifically if you can have Malachi Flynn, Gary Trent Jr., and Chris Boucher off the bench. That is a very good scenario, and with a very good defense. And so it's definitely a competitive team for Lowry. However, you definitely would have to argue that the 76ers, depending on what they have to give up in a sign and trade for Kyle Lowry, would be a more competitive team. They have one of the MVP candidates of this year in Joel Embiid on the roster, a defensive lockdown all-star in Ben Simmons, a solid wing player in Tobias Harris, and some good pieces around that. Danny Green, Seth Curry, Jake Milton, Tyrone Maxey, and of course Matisse Thybulle, who the 76ers did not want to give up in a Lowry trade at the deadline. I still do think that the 76ers are going to have to give up that type of talent. They're going to have to give up Thybulle and a Maxey or first round pick in combination of those types of assets to get Kyle Lowry in a sign and trade this summer. So I think that's something that we could see. Otherwise, I just don't think... I think there's going to be too many teams that are going to be interested in Kyle Lowry for that to be a sign and trade that functions otherwise, but I think the 76ers are definitely going to aggressively play for him, and along with the Raptors, have to be one of the favorites to acquire him. I think the next most likely is probably the Miami Heat. Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler have a very good relationship. They're both dogs. They work hard. They're good, play very hard on both ends. They're very competitive. They want to win, and they are very good leaders. And so I think that connection would definitely work very well. Miami could use a point guard, but it's not necessarily a necessity. Goran Dragic is still on the roster. But Kendrick Nunn is a restricted free agent, and he does want a lot of money. I don't know if he's going to get the money he wants, but he's an RFA. Things are weird. He definitely could get a large offer sheet that the Miami Heat are unwilling to unmatch. And so with that being said, it's definitely possible that he walks, and they are interested in acquiring another point guard. Goran Dragic only has another year left on his deal as well, and that is a team option. And so if they acquire Kyle Lowry, they don't necessarily have to bring back Goran Dragic, or they can opt out and try and re-sign him at a lower price. So there's definitely some options there for Miami, and they will definitely have interest in acquiring Kyle Lowry to add to a very good defensive backcourt. Put Jimmy Butler on the wing, Lowry at the point guard position, a very good creator for this team. I think he would fit their system very well. Could fit the Pat Riley and Mike Spoelstra mold very well. Some of the options that I think are possible and have to be considered but are a bit less likely. Firstly, the Los Angeles Lakers. Of course, they kind of need a third star. They don't really have that third guy. When you say who the third guy is on this Lakers team, it's tough to answer that. You could argue it's Dennis Schroeder. You could argue it's Kyle Kuzma. There isn't really a third guy on this team, and that's been an issue for them. The lack of depth in this playoff run especially has been a concern. And so I think a true quality point guard who's been there, who's won a chip, who can be a good leader alongside a guy like LeBron, I think would be very helpful for this team. Be someone who can hit catch and shoot threes, which on a team with LeBron is very important. And so I think that's something that's very valuable as well. But I think some first and Taylor Horton-Tucker definitely have to go the other way to Toronto if this deal were to ever happen. Moving on to, I think, the two least likely candidates, but still candidates that need to be talked about, are the Dallas Mavericks and New York Knicks. It's no surprise and no secret that these two teams are interested in acquiring a point guard, specifically the New York Knicks, who have been in talks in acquiring Lonzo Ball throughout this summer. The Knicks definitely need a point guard. Elfrid Payton cannot continue to be the starting point guard for this team in the long term, and I don't think Emmanuel Quickley is an ideal starting point guard for this team yet. I think he's better off as a bench, as a scoring guard. Of course, they have Derrick Rose there as well, but he will be a free agent. He may have great interest in resigning for the Knicks, but I also think he's best off the bench as a scorer, and they definitely could use a guy like Kyle Lowry, a very good leader on what is a fairly young team. He could bring a lot of leadership to this team, a lot of experience, good creativity, and playmaking in an offense that can sometimes be very stale, especially when Julius Randle is not having a great game. So I think this would be a very valuable asset for them. And also Mavericks, having a creator alongside Luka Doncic and someone who can hit some knockdown threes while improving their defense that isn't better this season, but not anywhere near the level they would like it to be at, would be very valuable. The Mavericks will also look to move Porzingis this season, but I don't think that's going to be in any type of Lowry trade. I don't know exactly what the components are here, other than maybe Josh Green and a first or a couple of firsts. But I think the Mavericks are definitely have interest in adding a point guard. But that being said, it really is very open with the Kyle Lowry sweepstakes this offseason. As I mentioned, I think it's going to be a couple of weeks into the free agency period until we see an offer for Lowry. I don't think we're going to see anything in the first few days for him. I think at least 5 to 7 days we're going to need until we see a decision from Lowry or we see a trade go down. Could be wrong on that, of course, as with anything, but that is what I expect. I think Toronto and Philadelphia are the two most likely landing spots, with Miami slightly in behind them. I think the Knicks, Lakers, and Mavericks are less likely. I don't think that Lowry has a great inclination to go to those places, because his relationship with Jimmy Butler helps with Miami. Of course, 76ers is his hometown, and he has such a great relationship in Toronto, and I think the family portion is very important for him. Of course, there's some talks, maybe him and DeMar meet up again, they're such good friends. I just don't think there's a team that can sign both of those players, or will want to sign both of those players, so I don't think that's a realistic option as much as I would love to see it as a fellow Toronto Raptor fan. But that is my thoughts on the Lowry sweepstakes this summer. It's going to be very interesting to follow how this offseason unfolds with him and where he will end up playing next season. If you guys did enjoy the video, feel free to leave a like down below and let me know your thoughts regarding Kyle Lowry next season and where you think he will be playing and what jersey he will be wearing next season. You guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next one.